Rudi and Chrissy are part of a team at LegendHasIT that has a lot of experience in cybersecurity. Let's listen to more of the call. This is part 2. You are listening to the IT Path Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Morrison. Let's go and help you claim your journey into IT. Okay, we're back with part 2. And where we begin here is I'm talking a little bit about small IT departments and some of the stresses that goes with that. And she will continue on where she left off with fixing issues in some of these small departments. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it I've seen people just get so stressed out about what's going on that everything that really should be on the top of their list is completely overlooked because they're trying to take care of the symptoms. If they could just focus on one of the bigger issues, their whole stack would be in a much better situation, but they're so overwhelmed. Like, I've lived it. I've been doing IT for 25 years, and I'm like, you guys know some of my stuff that's been going on, like panic attacks and all sorts of stuff. And I talk about that on here because I'm like, if nobody talks about the fact that you can have panic attacks and what goes on in one, that's a disservice to people out there that also have to deal with these sorts of things. But IT, if you don't keep yourself in check, and if you don't have like a company that I've been working with, you guys have kind of helped us out big time, looked over our shoulder. We had a lot of weird stuff going on. A network computer all of a sudden started scanning the ports on a honeypot, which is designed to be a triple alarm. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on? That person's at lunch. Nobody's sitting at that computer. And it's like, well, if nobody knew, right? And this is going on. You probably have stories that you could tell about where you've even seen this go on, where it looks like there's like nobody sitting at the helm. Nobody's got the wheel in their hand. So all of this garbage is going on behind the scenes that is just completely being overlooked. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, like you mentioned, these small IT departments, but I worked at a huge national multi-billion-dollar in profits bank, right? And I bring this stuff up, like I would see this stuff happening. Like, you could see the bad guy coming in and doing stuff they're not supposed to, and say, "Hey, we need to stop this. We need to block this place." And then the decision makers in this. I mean, the security team was, I don't know, at least 100 people. I don't know exactly, but my team was a team of 7, and I ran the vulnerability management and the penetration testing team, and I had 7, and it was just one little team. So I think there was about 100, and they're like, "Oh, we just passed our audit, so we're not going to worry about it."
Is the audit? Like, the audit was the checks and balances, and as long as it's on the form, that I've been through those. As long as it's on the form and it gets checked off, then they satisfy whatever the means are for the audit. And if you don't know, if you're listening, you don't know, basically what happens, and is various industries have various audit standards and various what's the name I'm looking for? The frameworks, compliance frameworks. Yep. Compliance that they have to adhere to. And basically there's check sheets, and an audit team will come in and they will look at this list, and they'll start checking things off, and then they'll start to address certain things. And as long as things are generally improving year after year, these things get overlooked. Sometimes even with disregard to how serious it is. If as long as you're showing that you're intentionally making a little bit of progress, then you could have some of the biggest flaws in the world, but because they're, moving forward, we're just going to turn a blind eye to these things that aren't being done.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, we can bring this back around to your original topic of, like the education and the certifications, but because I went through this rigor of JCAC and learned it the way that I did, I know what it's supposed to look like. I know what it looks like when it's good. right? Like I know how everything works. Um, so, and I think I like that attitude that I stopped working there. I couldn't take like speaking to your panic attack topic, like my hair was falling out. I wasn't sleeping. Like I didn't have any panic attacks, but I was stressed out. I was unhappy. Even my family was like, "Hey, you don't seem okay," because I know, like I could see bad things happening and nobody cared, and I attribute that to my education. I know what it's supposed to do. I know how easy it is to just click this button and close your firewall, like close FTP on the firewall. Like that's all you have to do. Like why does it take 3 months and 14 levels of bureaucracy, to stop the
BitLocker,
bad guy?
switch, turn it on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And I worked actually in an audit team that they were like, we were doing an audit, and hard drive encryption was one of the and so somebody from our audit team even told the person that we were auditing, the company we were auditing, well, I don't think BitLocker it meets the standard. You're going to have to go out and buy an encryption tool and I looked up online and I found which standards that, which certifications it meant. I'm like, no, totally. You can use,
Yes.
and the person probably was really offended that I was brand new to this and I inserted some knowledge and was probably offended that, but I'm like, look, you want these guys to go out and spend more money on something they don't even need? That's ridiculous. Turn it on. All right, we're going to come back to Rudi. Talk to us, like what you're doing now, the day to day. What do things look like for you and this company that you guys have? I want you to be able to speak to that too. This company that you guys have been working on.
So the company is called LegendHasIT. Spelled just as it sounds, right? Except all mushed together, right? LegendHasIT. You can check us out at LegendHasIT.com. It'll redirect you to .io for the meantime while the main site is being reworked. But so we're like a where do I start, right? So where we provide a lot of cybersecurity offering services, and those services might constitute as a little bit of R&D, right? Like how do you make this work? They come with a problem, or in some cases is we present an idea. What if we could do this? And then they didn't realize they wanted it, kind of thing. And then like we're traditional MSSP, which breaks out to managed security service provider, right? Just like there's ISPs, internet service providers, there's ITSPs. So who are the customers of those? Usually it's going to be small to medium businesses, sometimes usually referred to as SMBs, right? So kind of why I started in 2007, 2017 of August. And I was the director of R&D at another cybersecurity company, right? And their bread and butter was a lot of government work. And so I worked for them 5 years prior to that, before it became the director of R&D and a lot of as a contractor, right? When it comes down to it, government contracting, I can go on the whole spiel, but what it is you get pimped out for your work, right? So these other companies, they fill a niche. There's a requirement put out by the government to fill these seats, and these seats might be system security engineer or architect or help desk or whatever it is, and then these companies come in and fill it. So it was one of those. It is a cybersecurity company, but centered to filling seats for the government. No real commercial presence. So I worked on these things called cyber weapon systems for the Air Force at the time. Member system, all the parts that constitute the whole. So not just an IDS or packet inspector or a SIM and a SOAR, the security operational orchestration.
Let's run through those real quick for the listeners. IDS, intrusion detection. What was the next one? SIM system or SIM system.
Yeah, so it's security event
monitoring.
Monitoring it.
Yeah, and SOAR. What's SOAR?
the security orchestration, automation.
Oh yeah, yeah, and response. Yeah, that's right.
If you're thinking about automation, it's like, okay, your SIM is you're collecting you're aggregating all those logs and that data. The SOAR is going to be, how do I enrich this? I have an IP, but who's it belong to? So you could copy paste and go to your favorite, websites that you want to look up that information. Who owns this? What is, how big is this network? Things like that. Or you can have a tool that does it. And that tool might be leveraging what we talked about earlier, is like API. So
SolarWinds and some of these other companies that are out there that help with various pieces of this.
And so that's the important piece right there, which is all those little things that make it work, right? They're their own companies, right? And some of these companies might have 1 or 2, 3, 5 products but like, let's say a Cisco has firewalls, right? They also have firepower, right? So the firewalls are called ASAs, and their firepower module is just when you turn that firewall into an IDS, which you stated earlier, which breaks out to intrusion detection system. But they also sell threat intel, right? All those are premium. So if you're working for the government, best bet, like the government is paying the premium enterprise version of these licenses, right? So I used to be an architect and engineer for the cyber weapon system. And I always tell the Corps is just the government employee who's signing the checks for that contract, right? And I joke around with them and state that I can build it faster, cheaper, sexier, right? If you just let me off the leash, like you're playing for bloatware, and he realizes, right? In some cases, I managed to save money and extend those capabilities. But at that time, I saw the paradigm shift of, call it whales and then fish, right? So if you're a bad guy, who your target is. And so it's circling back to that SMB, that small to medium business. The whales are going to be the government, right? An agency or a department, let's say Air Force, Department of Energy, things of that nature, or Sony, a Home Depot, a Target. I said those names for a reason because they've all, in one or many points in time, have been compromised, right?
Yeah.
Those are the whales, right? And then you have small to medium businesses. One sec. Sorry, I had to sneeze an hour. Okay.
No worries.
You have these, get some water. Yeah, that was good. All right. So
was that an empty cup?
yeah, it was like 3 drops left on it. So the SMBs, yes, they're akin to like the S is really small, right? Small is going to be like a mom and pop. It might be a small lawyer office, right? 2, 3 lawyers, 1 lawyer, dental clinics. But it also extends itself to, anywhere from 20 to 50 different users, actual employees that are using all the computers and servers that allow them to make money, right? We're all in business to make money, and there's nothing wrong with it. Even nonprofits, they just have to equal out their books at the end of the fiscal year. That's just what makes them nonprofits, but they still get paid. Like, they don't do it for free. So if you look at the landscape of things, I'm building these cyber weapon systems. I'm kind of getting disenchanted because I see the same thing. People that make a tool, whether it's worth its weight or not, they're selling at outrageous price. You can't build that type of stack. When I say stack, think about the whole system, the entire security architecture, to include the appliances and then the staff who mans it, right? Because you can't set it, forget it. You have to maintain it. That's outside the budget of small to medium businesses. But guess what? They don't even know it exists. They're learning how to spell IT while bad guys are starting to shift their guns, their laser beams on her. And so I make that analogy of a whale and a fish. Yeah, it's not a whale. Like, if you're a bad guy and you're targeting small to medium businesses, but every time you put your hands in the water, you come out with fish. It's not a whale, but every time you put your hands in the water, you come out. And that's why they're a target, right? That's why you get these spray campaigns from like phishing, which is trying to click me bait to your email, to all sorts of different scams. And so I that's why I started Legend Has It, is that I said I could build this thing faster, cheaper, sexier. Nobody doubled down on it. The company I was the R&D for, they liked the idea, but they chose not to pursue it. So I built it, found a nonprofit to run my first prototype. It's codenamed Glitch, which later on became the Kraken. The Kraken is really just a framework, right, of how to do these things and scale and cheaply, and leveraging open source, leveraging the total sum of all the smart people out there. That's what open source is, right? Like where all the good ideas come to one, and we don't mind sharing. That's what puts you up top, is that the aggregation of knowledge, right? And how I look at open source. So built a tool, it ran, and then I left the company, started Legend Has It, and that was the primary target. As of late, last 2 years, we kind of shifted towards other IT companies, right, that are servicing small to medium businesses, because we don't want to do IT. There's a place, you and Chrissy were kind of sharing the horror stories, but when you zoom in, there's two frames of thought, right? And really, Dana, you're in between. You're like one of the substrates that makes everything happen. What I mean is that IT is usually in the mindset of, in a nutshell, is how many doors do I have to open into my users, right? My staff, my whoever it is that you're working with for. Stop yelling at me, right? Where cybersecurity is going to be, how many doors can I close until my users stop, right? We both know how things work, right? But we have a different point of view. And then there's few people like you, right? That understand the importance of the other side, right? Just like in cybersecurity, you can't close all those doors, right? Because you're maintaining the business. We're on business to put food on the table, right? So you can't just shut off everything. I could just unplug the internet and be like, yeah, you're totally secure, right? 100%. But it doesn't work out that way, right? So you have to understand the business line, right? And then articulate that on why things are a bad idea or they are a good idea. And then I always say that if you're not getting your point across, that means you're not being listened to. Then that's what that is, a microcosm. You add them all together, makes the macro, and that's what causes people to lose their hair, right, or lose their mind, or feel like they're no longer, or maybe displaced from the system that they started to love, right, or they want to love, right, but wherever they are, right, it's not the right, and then so it's that slow realization that not okay to feel like that, right? But you have to know all the parts, and those parts are going to different ways of thinking.
It grows into this animal that at some point there's an epiphany. The lights come on. For me, it was reading the Phoenix Project. I don't know if you guys have read the Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. Great book. And for me, that's when the lights came on. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm the guy Brent in the book. That's like the connection between. So some ways that connection between is a great thing. Like I'm bridging these two different worlds, but it's also put me in a position where I'm developing my team now in the company I'm with to make sure that we're getting better. We're getting better. Like coding goes here and this goes here, security goes here. And my guy, Chris, he's closing those doors that Rudy's talking about. And he's closing, and I keep telling him, well, go ahead and do it. And if we'll know soon enough if something broke, so go ahead and close that, whatever it was, go ahead and patch that on that computer, and let's keep them up to date. And Rudi and Chrissy and Legend Has It has been extremely beneficial for us. And I want to go back a little bit to, you were talking about the faster, cheaper, sexier model of this, and I think that is something that the modern day, I guess call you a technology enthusiast that's looking to get into IT. If you're looking in the modern day to get into this, I mean, there's big, fat, expensive stacks out there, but if you can figure out how to do the faster, cheaper, I want to keep saying cheapier, faster, cheaper, sexier model. Like Rudi, you and Chrissy stepped in to help us. We had a big, fairly good sized company help us with some coding. They stood up this virtual server. The server was in Amazon. It ended up getting compromised. It didn't lose any personal information or business information on the server, but it was just getting smoked with traffic. I mean, it was terabytes and terabytes of traffic up from maybe 20 gigs in a month to terabytes in a day. And I was like, well, what is the actual purpose of this machine? And we scoped it down, into, we can actually do everything that this virtual machine is doing in a Logic app. It's not going to cost us $50 a month to run the VM. It's only going to be $5 a month for the amount of flows that this thing runs. And we're going to be able to have that code so tight and not have to keep upgrading a stack. And the reason it was because you had mentioned about maintaining it. People don't maintain it. Oh, we're just going to throw up this server. It's no big deal. We're going to throw it out there. We're going to get this program running. Everything's going to be good. And then I forget what the compromise was. Maybe you or Chrissy remembers, but it was Java. It wasn't JavaScript. It was PHP or something on there that got compromised.
It was an older version of PHP that like they moved away from that version, but I think you're limited to that version because of the function, this third-party tool that leveraged. Yeah. So you couldn't upgrade because they didn't upgrade, right?
Right. And they were going to charge us. They were going to bill us more money. It was probably going to come down to about $5,000 extra that it was going to cost us to. And it's like, well, guess what? That entire system now costs us about $60 a year.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, right?
It's crazy.
And if you look at, the same thing we were saying, which is you understand how things work, right? And then you're figuring out, like, how do you do that differently? You know how to do it because it's working, but it's not working at its most optimum. And then so you start to build requirements, right? I need to lower the price because the way we do things, I know how it works. And then this construct, right? And I'm holding my left hand up, right? Is what's working, but it costs this. Now we have this new requirement. I need to do the same thing on my left side and go to the right side, but the cost needs to be way different, right? So then you got to figure out, okay, where can I substitute, and then how much does this cost? So what you're doing is you're taking everything that fundamentally, right, how they work, and then you're putting on the other side, and then but the driver is that requirement, and it might be a list of them, it might be just one. Hey, make it cheaper, right? Or it might be cheaper, and then
cheaper and more secure was our scenario.
Exactly, right. And so that's a beautiful thing too, right? Which is, you always have to have that back of your head. Just because you want to go the IT route, right? You have to be cognizant of the cybersecurity world, and then vice versa. Those that want to play cybersecurity, right? You have to be cognizant of the line of business that you operate in, because the beauty of being in IT or cybersecurity is that every niche needs it, right? Meaning every business line. If you want, for accountants, they're going to know somebody in IT and cybersecurity. Even if you're just an artist, you have to know somebody in IT, right? Whether you're whoever sets up your website, if you're selling on your email address, right? How you're going to accept payments, right? Maybe you have a Square set up. Even if you're just selling art on the side, the people that are facilitating that, right? From maybe like setting up your email to payment systems to a website, there's going to be people like you and I, right? And so that's the beauty of it, right? But in order to be successful and not limited, you have to understand that there is a business case, and then you have to take into account functionality, right? IT functionality and business functionality, and then security. And so it's just asking one more question, like, how's it work? And then how do you break it, if you will?
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about before, how you break it, how do you fix it? How do you mitigate it so that somebody can't do the same thing again? Right.
Yeah. And so, at LegendHasIT, we, without sounding cliche, like we take pride in that we can figure things out, and they're not always cybersecurity centric, but because we have that mapping in our head, if you will, right? Think about like neural pathways, like we have this way of thinking, we apply it to different things. Chrissy spelled it out beautifully, where it was after JCAT, what we really got out of it is this way of thinking and we can apply it to the evolution of the internet. What I mean is, even sometimes we play like a VCTO, right? Virtual CTO,
Yep.
TO just being the chief technical officer, right?
Yep.
Of a company. So we have a client, longest client that we've had is it's a marketing firm, right? Small team, but they're good at what they do. When I first met them, the owner, her name's Cece. She's brilliant, and I remember speaking to her, and she's telling me, you know, Rudi, I got all these tools, right? I got all these tools to do, like for her booking, for shipping and sharing information, like a business job box to a Monday.com to all these different types of third-party tools that she's paying, you know, $100 here, $12 here, $300 here, right? And it adds up, right? But she also had 365, which is, you know, Microsoft's product for businesses. She was already paying for that, right? And so I listened to her, right? And a lot of it is listening, taking in information, and then I'm mapping in my head how you can do that better, right? But I'm also listening to how they do it, how they like to do it, the things they like about the project features within Monday.com, or the mobility of a business Dropbox or something like that, right? And then I try to map it to what they have, and it's more cost effective. All that to say is that I introduced them that you have some of this functionality which in 365, which can, and then you can keep these other third-party tools because there's no bleed. It's like a Venn diagram, right? Where you're paying for double or 3 times. If you're paying for Zoom and a Ring and Teams, then you don't need to. It could just be one, right? And then which one you want to use is really up to how you conduct business, right? And so all that, and then within 3 months, she started plinking away, her and Stacy, which is the director of operations, figuring out what they should be paying for, and then migrate, teaching their staff, hey, we're going to use this instead, right? This is the better way, and it's more secure, things like that, right? From password management to things like, and so we saved them $3,500 a month, $3,500 a month, right? Like,
wow.
And it wasn't security, like it wasn't a security project. It was more of that VCTO, which is we're listening to their issues, right? We're listening to they need to do this, they wish they could do this, and then what you start to derive once you solve those, right? If you're really paying attention, is that you can offer things that they never knew that they could have or they wanted, right? From there, I could say, well, what if we can automate this? And they're like, that would be beautiful. It wasn't something that they outright asked for. It was just, I could see in between the lines, hey, this would be sexier if this could be, you know, automated. And they're like, and so I with her, I use the term automagic all the time. So now
I do. I use that too. Automagically. That's cool. And yeah, that resonates with me. I mean, we've automated, as you know, a lot of stuff in the company I'm with. When something gets shipped out the back door, that an invoice automatically happens, and then when our team comes in first thing in the morning, pick tickets already printed and labels and all that stuff can kick right out on the printers automatically for the team in the back. And it saves hours and is accurate. It's when you can automate, you can often improve the accuracy as well, because hands moving keyboards and mice around is going to introduce an error at an error rate, even for the most efficient, most accurate people. There's going to be an introduction to errors.
Some people like to dog or the concept of automation, right? Where you can do this automagic function, and I say embrace it. Not everybody who's in IT and cybersecurity are known. Sometimes they're considered lazy, right? Because they're like, what do you do? Right? You get questioned. But I always encourage, I've had my own staff tell me oh, I'm lazy, I need direction. So I say, you know what, you could use that. So anybody listening to this who's not in IT and thinks that they are lazy, you can still harness that power. And what I mean is that things like automation. So let's say you're working for me, right? And you consider yourself lazy. And I'm asking you to update these 50 servers every other week, right? And then the current way of doing it, the current process is that you have to log into each one remotely. and then you have to hand crank on that keyboard. And you can be the fastest typer in the world, but it still takes you, 1 to 2 hours. So 1 to 2 hours every other week in order to do this one thing. It becomes mundane.
And then maybe you miss one.
Exactly, right?
And it doesn't reboot. It doesn't actually apply the patch.
Right? And then you got to go hunt. And then so it might extend. So that's the mundane thing to do. Some places, some jobs that's acceptable or it's needed. But for IT, for cybersecurity, again, moving at the speed of the internet, what makes it great is that there's tools out there, right? So I've told my staff exactly this, which is, if you consider yourself lazy, use it. I'll agree with you or not agree with you. I don't care. Just use it. So what I mean is spend 17 hours of glory on Red Bull, whatever you need to do to keep yourself awake, right? I'm speaking in particular for one scenario. I won't say his name, but he was my deputy director when I was the director of R&D, and he'd always, self-deprecate. So I told him in particular, I'm like, spend 17 hours of glory and he loved, Monster, right? I said,
oh, yeah.
Down those monsters and come up with a script. He wrote beautiful scripts that did all these things. I'm like, come up with a script to fix this, right? Or on a recurring basis. So now you just press a button, right? And then now you have your free time back. But for like people that are in charge of other people, right? Or are leaders, right? Or managers, directors, even if it's a party of 1 or 20, like when you free up time, right? Humans become really good at being humans, and that's being creative. It's coming up with ideas. And I always give the example about, civilization. So if, civilization started at when we started planting food, we had an abundance of food. Now, before that, we're hunters and foragers, right? We spent all our intelligence, all our energy going from the next meal, right?
Somebody could have been like, hey, let's come up with a better trap.
Yeah, exactly, right? And until then we started agriculture, right? Well, now we had abundance of food. When we had abundance of food, you had free time. And it was only then, right? You're sitting by the campfire, and then somebody's like, hey, I've been working on this thing called poetry. And I'm like, oh, good. Tell me about it. Afterwards, I've been working on this thing called math. That was the beginning of civilization. We had free time.
Hey, this is Dana Morrison, host of the IT Path podcast, and I hope you are enjoying this week's episode. Are you interested in getting into IT? Let me ask you one simple question. What is holding you back? IT Path is dedicated to developing a community, content, and courses that will help you get unlocked and stay unlocked on your IT journey. I have more than 25 years experience in IT, and I want to share with you what I've learned and give you the tools to succeed on your very own IT path. Even if you are just starting out on your IT journey, we're here for you. To find out more, simply go to itpath.net and sign up for the mailing list, and we will start by sharing some tips, tricks, and tools to help you get going and keep you going. Go to itpath.net and claim your journey. Start your IT path today. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the episode. It's when at the company I'm with right now, we block out a 2-hour block of time on Fridays for personal learning. And it's great if it cross pollinates with their jobs. I encourage that. But if it's just being creative and exploring, Chrissy, let's shift back. Rudy's been doing all the talking. Let's shift back to you.
He does that a lot.
So talk to us about I don't know, anything. Oh, you know what? There's something very specific I would like for you to speak to, and that is women in tech.
Okay.
It's a general trend that we see. Well, it's just a male-dominated field. A lot of females are discouraged from getting into it because they see kind of what's going on in the field. I don't know if maybe that even been some of the aversion that you had in the early days when electronics, you're thinking, well, I don't have that as an interest. It's obviously something that's developed. Speak to the females out there that are maybe thinking about or just trying to determine if a field in IT, no, you're good. A field in IT or cybersecurity might resonate with them.
I don't know. I may be not the greatest person to ask that question because I was thrust into this male-dominated world my entire adult life, right? Like, so I haven't really known anything else. I have experienced challenges along the way, right? But being 20, I was 20 when I joined the Navy, but I was on a ship with 1,200 people, and there were maybe 50 women total. I it was never. I was definitely treated differently, right? Like I was asked to be the administrative assistant for my ship or my division on my ship. The only reason is because I was a female. A man raised his hand. I didn't raise my hand, and I became the administrative assistant.
Isn't
right?
that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah. And a couple times, after I was also in reserves, right? My 15 years wasn't all active duty. I did 8 active duty, and then I transitioned to the reserves. So I had, my reserve duty as the cryptologic technician, and then I was a government contractor for one of the big government contracting companies. And I would have these ideas, and people wouldn't listen, right? I would say something that it was pretty fundamental. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but I was the only one saying it, and they completely disregarded me. So what I had to do was I had to become like water. I had to figure out how to get my voice heard, right? Like if I were to yell and scream or like, why don't you listen to me? I didn't think that would fix anything, right? So what I did was I found somebody who would listen to me, and I asked them to relay it for me, right? So eventually, so that's what happened, right? Like I told one of my very good friends, like his name was, I shouldn't say his name, but I told him, I'm like, hey, say this in this meeting, and they were like, so he did, and they were like, oh, what a great idea.
Wow. And
they
did that person give you credit? And then eventually the report got built. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to it's not as bad as it used to be. This was several years ago, right? But so I kind of had to figure out how to get my voice heard and my ideas out there. But I don't know that that's too different from any junior analyst. I think it's a similar story, whether you're male or female. I do think maybe being a female it's a little bit harder. But
no, you say that, and it hurts me to hear the pains that you've had in this, because the females that I know that have stuck it out, let's say, have brought some very interesting assets to the table that men sometimes have a harder time with. One of those things is that, and just in a general tendency that I've seen, is that the women that I've known in IT have been incredible logic thinkers and have had the ability to strip away the emotional layer a little bit, and have also been very good at reading people and reading situations. And I don't know if that's just something that's innate to us as sexes, or if there's if that's just a little bit stronger in particular people, and that's why they end up getting into IT. But I'm just saying that's something I've noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do think like men and women are different, and we do bring different beautiful things to the table, right? And there is a shift towards identifying that and celebrating that, which is amazing. Like when I first joined the Navy, I was slapped on the butt, like, hey, sweetheart, like all this stuff to where I am now, where I'm an equal, right?
And
like,
if you reported it, probably
exactly, no one would care, right? Like, right. But the thing is, the same thing as surviving in JCAC, you have to have the tenacity, right? Because it is difficult, right? But the one thing that helped me through was the other females around me, right? One of my personal hero is a woman that I met at the big government contracting company, where I had to get my friend to help me pass on my ideas. This woman, she's older than me. Your interview with the woman who was the admin turned IT, reminded me, her story reminded me of my own personal hero. I'll go ahead and say her name because she's a beautiful, wonderful person, and I actually think you should interview her. But her name is Fawn, and she's an older woman, and she told me the story. She wanted to be an engineer ever since she was a little girl. So she went to college, and she went to college, and was in an engineering program, and the professors there bullied her into switching into a more female role or a more female degree program. They're like, oh, what are you doing here? You need to get out. But she didn't. She stuck it out. She did stop, but she became a tech educator, right? She got an education degree and started teaching tech people, and worked her whole life. She started off as help desk, right? Like she was teaching, and then she's like, I'm going to pivot to help desk, and she worked her way, and now she is an engineer for this extremely specific secret, program where she's writing and testing code. And she is an engineer. She became an engineer at the age of 60. She was in her early 60s, and she finally got her engineer title.
Crazy. I would love to interview. I would love to interview her. You'd make a connection.
Yeah, I'll talk to her for you. I'll introduce you over email or whatever. But she is an amazing person. She was always encouraging, right? And she had my back. She understood what I was going through, right? She had advice for me. We ate our lunch together. She let me vent, and we just kind of survived, right? Together. And having that support system, it wasn't just her. It was my friend, my male friend, who would listen to me and help me, right? And he helped say, well, that was actually Chrissy's idea, right? And then, that group that was helping me suddenly became everybody, and I didn't need, like my voice was heard, right? I became a leader, right? And it's because I found that support system. You have to pick the people. It doesn't have to be only female, because there are males who will support you. Like, that is the majority, actually. It's the minority that will, discriminate against you just because you're a female or whatever. But you find that group of people who will support you and help you, and eventually that group grows so big that it's just normal now. It's not something that you have to get through.
Let's go back and forth a little bit between you and Rudi. I would like for you to each, we'll go back and do maybe a handful of these. We'll go back and forth. I want you to tell me something that people should learn that schools don't teach. Schools do. You cannot buy this at a school. Either one. Go ahead and give us something that schools don't teach.
She's fighting with me, telling me to go first.
There's plenty of them. If we just stop and think about it a little bit, like I just have a ton that I know that I try and teach people, like, as far as like, one of them for me is that there's lies that we believe in our heads that prevent us from moving forward. And until you address that, it's like these bricks of assumptions that we make that, it's like something, if you could know, you can do it. You're not too old. You're not too young. There's no barriers. You're a female or you're not a female, whatever, those barriers are bricks that when we remove them, we realize that we can get back to what you were saying earlier on, Rudi, and that nerds have options.
I think one thing that should be taught that isn't, I think it is maybe in like some psychology classes and what have you, but I think if we're told about it, it's exercised at a earlier age, we become that much more masterful, and that's ego, like what ego is, right? And sometimes you have to speak to it in regards, especially in the beginning, when anybody of any age, it's almost like a outer body experience, this other thing, right? But then we capture that it is self, right? But the more you recognize that that an ego exists, like nobody's absent of it, the more that we can use it as a factor. Meaning, if you're saying that I am the way I am because of this, right? The way I grew up, from this is the school I went to, this is how I was always taught. I know it's different now, but this is how I grew up. So you recognize that there's factors, right? But
Yeah.
you're accepting.
You are who you because people told you this. Like you're a procrastinator. You're
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but if we're taught that ego exists, then it's a factor. So then, natively, like humans, we want to solve things, right? And sometimes it's not always the best solution, but we have to know what the tools are there. And if you know that ego exists, that means it can become a tool, or you recognize it so that you can put it aside to if it's in the way, anyways, trying to get from point A to point Z, right? Like you recognize that, and I think we learn what ego is too late in life, right? And then just think about it, like it's not necessarily mastering outright, it's just recognizing it's there. And when you do that enough times, then you become a master at it. But you need more time, right? The more times you recognize it, then you become more master. But if you start later, then that whatever constitutes as times is a smaller value than later. So
that's good. Chrissy, something that schools don't teach that maybe you wish they taught, or that you would just teach people anyway.
That's really hard, a little bit on the spot. But what I wish that I learned, I guess, is a different
think about it that way.
What I wish I had learned at a younger age was how applicable, like how to apply this something that I've learned to other things, right? Like from a practical experience, like as a teenager, I worked in restaurants for a really long time, right? But doing that taught me how to deal with customers, right? How to guide a conversation from somebody yelling at you into something productive, right? So you could solve a problem or come to a conclusion, or at least shake hands and walk away, whether you were happy or not, right? And to not discount that, as actual experience. When I was
go ahead. And I was just going to say, I want you to finish your thought. I've talked about that on various podcast episodes, is that people don't understand. You're thinking out there that you might want to get into IT. Your skills transfer.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because compliance, right? We were speaking of compliance before. I cut my compliance chops having nothing to do with cybersecurity. It was when I was working in the nuclear support facility, because we had to comply with the Department of Energy, NAVCO4, like all these different government organizations really, really care how you deal with radioactive material, right? And you have to prove that you're handling it really well. And I had to go through compliance verifications probably every other month, like literally every other month I was being audited, right? So I learned how compliance works. And not to be like braggadocious, but I'm pretty good at it,
I bet you are.
At
Rudy
translating.
Comes to you when there's
at translating what the requirement is, what we actually do, and how to say the words so that both sides, who have no idea what each other are doing, can come to a conclusion, right? So, and then, as an electronics technician, it was cabling and stuff, but the real thing that translated was troubleshooting, right? And logic, right? Like I'm speaking about logic gates, like and, or, not, right? Like the actual logic of if this, then that. Right. I would not have survived JCAC if I hadn't already known that, I don't think, So all of those things helped me be where I am now. And being able, like, if I didn't, come to that conclusion until, just a couple of years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I'm almost 40 now, and
I'm 51, and I've just come to a lot of conclusions about a lot of different things that I'm like, oh my goodness, things that I wished I'd known earlier.
Yeah. So like I was a professor at a university here, And I always had students come up to me like, oh, how can I write this resume? I have no experience. I'm like, what are you talking about? You were in the military, you have a job, you have a family. Like, tell me what you did, right? And even like those people, they don't know like that those skills, those things that they learned this whole time that they were alive is completely applicable to whatever it is you're trying to change
Oh,
into.
you see the shelf behind me. These are all
I do.
projects. These are all, but
Yeah.
now, other than the Iron Man mask, maybe I'll take a picture of that and put it online. But my son 3D printed that. But
Oh wow.
that's a metal detector right there. It's I built it from a circuit I got from Bulgaria. Computer I've taken apart, that was a PF Sense firewall. This is part of a Raspberry Pi setup that I built with our youngest son, who's 16 now. Books over there that I've read, Raspberry, little Raspberry Pi, a DAC, an audio DAC for, but people don't understand. Play with it, play with tech, play it, and think about like everything that you've done. It doesn't matter. Like one of my early jobs was a dishwasher, but you know what? Taught me to be reliable. Taught me to
Yeah,
show up for
exactly.
work,
Yeah.
where a lot of millennials don't show up to work first days. It's like some of them.
Yeah.
Let's pivot a little bit. I'm going to tell you these next two things because you might want to delineate a little bit, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up here. I mean, I'm just having a great time talking to you guys. And this is Rudi and Chrissy with LegendHasIT, and they've been just knocking it out of the park, talking about just life stuff, learning stuff, a lot of different experience in cybersecurity, how you apply different things, how my favorite quote here so far is nerds have options. I love that. I would like for each of you to comment about how community has affected, talking about things that schools don't teach is important to us because we're trying to expose that. Also exposing how community is so important. Schools seem to like shove this stuff down because they want you to just kind of come to their program and sit in their classroom. It doesn't matter if your eyes are glazed over or not. There's a lot of people that sit in a classroom that aren't getting out of their education what they could be because they're just not applying themselves. And if they're not going to apply themselves in the classroom, what are they going to end up in the jobs in the workplace? So each of you speak to us about how community has impacted where you're at or lack thereof. And also how mentorship and coaching, somebody looking over your shoulder, somebody walking alongside you, was there somebody specific? You don't necessarily have to name names. Chrissy, maybe yours is that person you mentioned earlier. But how that is important to you and how that should be important to people who are looking to advance their, maybe you're already in IT and you're looking to figure out where the next step is. I mean, having somebody, a coach, a mentor in your life can have a huge impact. I'd like for you to speak about that. But first, let's community. How has community affected you, Rudi?
How has community affected me? I guess I get blindsided, not blindsided. It makes me pause. It's affecting, right? Because it hasn't stopped. It's evolutionary. So
that's right.
As you get older, no matter whether you start in a great community or not, you start to learn what good is. So anybody listening know that, right? So if you feel like you haven't hit good yet, it's bound to come. You just recognize what bad looks like, and then vice versa, right? And community can be the immediate, those around you, whether it's friends, maybe your siblings, mom, pop, immediate family. So I've been blessed where I found people that compliment me, and then even so much so that they challenge me, and then even above that is that they allow me to challenge them, and then that's the evolutionary part of community, because it's steel sharpens steel, so to speak, right? Like cannot grow without a little bit of pushing on the edges, and then you start to feel your shape become part of that cog and within the system, right? And then earlier I spoke about whether or not once you find your part in the system, whether you enhance the entirety or not. And that comes from whether you can sharpen others, give, and then critique, held to the other standard, because you need that. You can't, if you're surrounded by a bunch of those that say it's all right, when you're failing, deep down that you're failing, and then you're just told that it's okay to accept it. It's okay to have a little bit of fire, right? And then keep on pushing. I have many certs, right? And I did it because I knew that I needed to get a job, and that's what they're looking for. I want to make sure that there's no reservation, like they couldn't stiff arm me. So I went out and got it, right? But I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty good test taker, but I realized what they were. I wasn't thinking that it's because I had my CEH, I was gonna become a pen tester. But furthermore, the people that are around me never said that just because I have a CEH or a CISSP, that I don't have a doctorate in hacking, right? And so we still sharpen the steel. Like they hold me to a different standard, right? Because we have a thing to do. And so when it comes to community, you need a little bit of that, right? It's not so much a jostle, it's just hold you to a different standard. A good friend will tell you, hey, you're messing up, right? They don't say it's okay, because if you think about it, I don't have kids, but this is how I imagine why, some parents are upset by their little ones, right? Or big ones. And it's because they held them to a different standard, right? And I'm holding my left hand up, right? Like this pedal. And then you performed at this lower, right? So my hand's a little bit lower. You performed here. But the way I see you, right? The way the community sees you is up here. And it puts a little fire into you, right? That you want to be above reproach. Like when weighed and measured, you're found outstanding, right? It's not cocky, it's just competence, right? Because you know that you can do it to others. And it might come in the form of hey, you're messing up, right? And it might be jokingly, right? But you have to follow up with something. It's not enough just to call people out. Like, you need a solution to that thing, right? And that's, again, community. So as far as my life, I've been blessed, both in service and outside. I've been in places where there was a lack, and you feel it, especially emotionally, like, and it spills over to the physical. And I've had good examples, and I hate to say that I didn't realize they were great examples until after the fact, when I was in the bad thing, right? It was like the negative, the contrast on the other side. But and then as of late in business, like I started the company in 2017, but and I saw how things were operating and where I left, right? And I actually went right into, I was doing my own thing for about half a year. This other company, another cybersecurity company here in San Antonio, I came across the owner totally by accident, and then he heard what I was doing. He heard where I left. He's like, "Hey, come do it under my flag." And then I'm real thankful. The owner's name is Jose. I learned a lot from Jose as far as business, right? But it still wasn't. I saw the things that I liked, right, and then the things that I didn't like. So it was the compare and contrast, right? But he allowed me to voice that, right? He allowed me to sit at his C-suite level and then tell him, hey, I don't think you should do this. And it's his business. He's a millionaire. I'm not, right? That's just an example where people allow me. I'll say Chris's name. Chrissy allows me to give her feedback, and she doesn't take it to heart, right? And I'm not yelling at her, right? But it's on me to make sure that if I'm going to deliver anything, like whether it's a critique or suggestion or a disappointment or a high five, like it has to be with substance, because she does the same thing for me, right? And so I'm thankful that she allows me to do that, because what that does, it earlier I talked about ego. It allows you to push that to the side, and then get stuff done, right? Like when it comes down to it, it's get stuff done. And that's why we can move at the speed at what we move, right? Because we have that fundamental background, but like we recognize that our community, right? Whether it's 5, 10, it's vital in that. Right? You have to surround yourself with people that are like-minded.
You're the average of the top 5 people you hang out with. I think it's 5.
Yeah.
You're the average of that. So if you're looking at that and you're like, that you look at your community, your top 5 people you hang out or spend the most time with or whatever, you look at those 5 people and you're like, they're not going the direction you want. You have to ask yourself some hard questions.
Exactly. Right. And so, and then you have to accept some of that. Right. And, Chrissy will tell me, I'll ask her thoughts on something. Right. And I won't agree, but I'll listen to the rebuttal. And some cases I say, I don't lament and like put my tail between my legs. I just say, no, you're right. Because I have like we call it interrupt, IO, right? And so in IT, if you're typing away and then you want to move your mouse, what you just told the computer is, hey, I have a new instruction. That mechanism is called IO or interrupt output. And so you just told the CPU, I'm about to give you another instruction that allows you to move the mouse, right? So I have a mental IO, right, that says, put your ego aside. Is what's coming through the other from this other person or people? Is it of substance? Does it have some weight and measure? So that, and again, as of late, I've been finding other business owners and partners that think like I do, and instead of before, it used to be trying to please everybody, and then, but I was in the red, right? As a company, I was going in the red. Then I started to cut those that weren't adding. So that altogether, maybe. I'm kind of
so it's corrective. Like a good community is going to be a corrective community. It's going to be drawing people into that direction. If Rudi, if you'd given Chrissy the instructions to build a door for a car, you're a car manufacturer, and you say, you got to build me this door, it's going to be $50. It doesn't matter how beautiful the door, if it doesn't fit the car, then the whole point is lost, right?
It was just once.
Well, the rest of the car is not built to the right spec, so you change the rest of the car to make my door fit. But then there's times that the door does fit. Here, let me show you why. Because when you put the hinges in and they're recessed and they fit in there, now it closes, and you'd be like, oh yeah, okay. Yep, I did it again. I had to cut the audio. Sorry about that, but come back for part 3 where Chrissy picks up talking about community and how essential that is. Rudi has just answered some of that. Now it's Chrissy's turn to take over and drive the conversation a little bit more. So I hope you come back for part 3 next week. See ya. You have been listening to the IT Path podcast. Did you like this episode? Why not subscribe and share it with others? IT Path is dedicated to helping you claim your IT journey. You can find out more at itpath.net.